if we do this here, what's going to happen here, here, and
Mhm.
here? The first solution isn't necessarily the best solution. The easiest solution isn't necessarily the right solution either. People need to feel that they're part of something and that there's a
Mm.
belonging in what they're doing.
Uh,
Better questions lend themselves to more clarity in the answer, which then lends itself to better clarity around what you need to do next. By asking better questions, you're able to create the exceptional experiences that you want to have.
Hello and welcome to the Differentiation podcast. My name is Michèle Sorgaroli and I'm your host. And today we are being joined by our very special guest, Dave Rogers. Now, Dave is also known as the Business Explorer. He is a TEDx speaker, an award-winning consultant, a coach, and an author. And for 30 years, he's been using his curiosity to help businesses tackle challenges, spark growth, and find innovative ways to succeed. Whether he is partnering with business owners, mentoring students, or even chairing a board, Dave is known for turning lofty what if strategies into real and practical what's next results. So I'm really looking forward to this today, Dave. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for a wonderful intro, first of all, Michelle. It's
Uh,
a pleasure to be here to have a chat with you today.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to dig into this later because I am curious. This idea of lofty what if strategies, we're going to come back to that, but I've sort of planted that seed of curiosity for me. But I want to
Yeah.
start before we get into the real juicy stuff, start with the simple stuff. From my understanding, you started your career as a qualified accountant and then you
Ye-
went into commercial finance. And then you covered all non-finance areas for the remainder of your career in corporate. And then a few years ago, you launched your consulting practice.
Yeah.
Okay. So we
Yeah,
started with
that's
money.
exactly it.
Yeah, perfect. How did you end up with the money game, as I'd like to call it, where you were in accounting? And, how did you convert into all non-finance areas of business for the next 27 years?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I will try and keep it as short and
All
sweet as
right.
possible,
Give us a
considering there's
summary.
nearly 30 years to cover with this sort
Exactly.
of journey. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I suppose going back to sort of pre-working days, I was always
Yeah.
strong numerically in my time in education in the
Mm.
UK. And it just sort of it sort of felt natural to a certain degree to go into something like accountancy in that regard. But
Uh,
as I say to a lot of people, I decided that accountancy wasn't for me, or traditional accountancy, should I say.
mm,
But I enjoyed the analytical side and the and that's where my
uh,
curiosity really first started about understanding business and how the decisions other departments in the large organisations I worked for, the commercial impact that was having. So it was natural for me to then to start business partnering with those departments, which then eventually led me through, different companies, different industries, but working in within those departments as well as supporting them at the same time.
that's really interesting. Talking about your curiosity, first it was analytical, which
Yeah,
was really the beginning of maybe your curiosity or where it pointed first was the
yeah,
analysis, but then you converted that in this just now, you converted the curiosity into being about the impact,
yeah,
which
yeah.
is really
And
interesting.
yeah, and that's what it's always been about for me. It's about how can I and others support businesses to become sort of better, and by utilizing the data or the conversations or the curiosity or the collaboration where you can really see the or understand, should I say, before you see the results, and have a better
Mhm.
idea of where those decisions are going to take us, but also highlighting where those opportunities are, but also the risks that those decisions might um, manifest in any of the businesses I've worked in.
Yeah, that's really curious. So, where do you think this curiosity was birthed, if you will, for lack of better language?
Yeah, 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 yeah. An interesting choice of
That's
words.
what I thought. I was like, wait, that's not really what I want to say, but
Yeah, but I'll get the gist of the question, which is good. I think I've always been I was always sort of curious as a child, and I think being born in the early 70s and growing up through the late 70s and 80s, where there was a lot of, I mean, we talk about technology and the enhancements we have in technology and AI now, but when you think about some of the developments back back then, and it was sort
Yeah.
of the birth of, personal computers and gaming consoles and all of those sort of mobile phones and the internet and all of those things that we all take for granted now, is you sort of almost built with this, or I feel I was built with this sort of innate curiosity to go, okay, so what's that all about? Let's go and find that. Oh, I quite like, as I said, maths and analytics and science and things like that. And it was like, how do I program a computer? And how do I, how does that work? And I'm very much one of those people who goes, right, so explain that to me so I understand how that works to enable me to help somebody do something better. And I
Mhm.
think that's where it was born from as a child. Just, I'm big into Lego for my sins. So that was again something that I've reintroduced to my curiosity portfolio in adulthood. So it's those sorts of things like how does that work? Like what's happening there? And it's, yeah, just born from that really, I think.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. I think um, I thought it was curious because at the time you were born, there was so much innovation at
Yeah.
that time. Like everything was new. Um, I remember my dad coming home in the early 80s with the first calculator, and it was the
Mm.
size of one of these red bricks. It was like the brick behind you. It was like the size of one of
Yeah,
those. The thing, and it was
yeah.
about as heavy as well. And all it did was your basic math functions. It didn't do
Yeah,
anything other than plus and minus and division and multiplication. That
yeah.
was pretty much it. I don't think it even did square roots. It was,
No, no,
and
no.
we were just fascinated by this machine.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think about like my early sort of accountancy career as a trainee in the private sector, and we had one computer, desktop computer, in the corner of an office that was the accounting system. And now I speak to people and go, well, I can actually run my business on my mobile phone, and
Yeah,
I don't need, and it's just that when you
incredible.
think about that transition over the last sort of what that would be 45 years ish, no, sorry, 35 years ish, you just think, like, wow, it's like,
Yeah.
it's all, my view is it almost pales into like now today's technology. Yes, it's amazing where we're going with it, and they talk about the speed of technology, but the actual concept of change back when I was growing up is very different to what it is now. And I think that's just something that yeah, that in the nicest possible way, people of a certain age can only appreciate as we go through life.
Can you expand on that? You said, technology today and the advancements today are different. What did you
Yeah, I
mean?
think for me, I think for me, it is the speed of change, I think, to a certain degree, as
Mm.
opposed to the size of the change, if that makes sense. So if you think
Hmm.
about going from, telephones that were attached to a wall that you couldn't go anywhere with to being able to have a mobile phone, that in terms of mobility
Yeah,
was incredible. But it was over a relatively long period of time, and we were able to get used to it, and mobile phones, have developed over time. And so therefore, when you go through a standard change sort of curve, people are allowed time to the laggards are allowed time to catch up into whatever that technology was back then. Whereas now I think we're at a stage where the
mm,
technology is advancing so quickly that
yeah,
you're almost, some people, and it still blows my mind some days when I have conversations with people who say things like, oh, I've not really explored ChatGPT yet, or what's Claude, or I've not heard of Perplexity. And I'm sort of thinking, well, they're on versions,
mm,
4, 5, and 6 of these things, and nobody started using them. Whereas previously, everybody would have been, on version 1, and somebody might be using version 2. And I think
right.
that's what I meant. It's like that speed of change. It just doesn't allow people to really comprehend what's happening.
Mm, isn't that true? And it's interesting coming from your very early perspective as a young boy, having the
Yeah,
curiosity to think about how does something work? I also noticed that you had an interest in Lego, and I was thinking about how to build, the
Yeah.
blocks of how does that result. Um,
Mm,
so that curiosity, I would imagine, the way you're framing it around how does that work, and the building blocks of Lego as a metaphor
mm,
for how does that work? How do you build that to work? I am curious about when you think about that perspective and the analysis of numbers and having gone into the complexity of business, and you now call yourself the business explorer.
yeah.
Tell us a little bit about where that came from, that particular title, if you will, the business
Yeah.
explorer. What has inspired that? And then I want to talk a little bit more about this concept of lofty
Yeah.
strategies, what if strategies.
Yeah. So I think the sort of the exploration sort of concept, I suppose, behind the business explorers really came from wanting to learn about new things and going and finding things out. And if you think about the traditional sense of exploration, it was going and discovering things that nobody really knew about. It's not quite to that level, but it's more about saying, well, actually, let's go and speak to a business owner or a business leader about their particular challenges to understand where they're at and what they're trying to achieve and what they've tried to get there, but then bring a different perspective in exploring those challenges with them from things I've found out
Mm-hmm.
elsewhere in my life and my career. So whether it be, they talk a lot, we talk a lot about having transferable skills that apply to, various different industries, for example, or sizes of business. And that's what it is for me. It's almost going, right, how can I explore a new idea or a new industry or a new business or a new concept that gives me the learning that enables me to help support a different business in a different, you know, genre
Yeah.
of business or a different point in their business life cycle. But it might be adopting something that I learnt in hospitality in a I don't know, in a manufacturing environment, and it's that sort of, yeah, cross pollination of learning, I suppose.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, so I can hear what you're saying between the lines. I would like to hear from your words. What's important about that expansive perspective when you're going in to explore?
Mm.
What is lighting you up? What's important to you about that particular
Uh,
approach?
I think for me, what lights me up about that approach is seeing people who know they need to change something and want to change something, but aren't quite sure how to go about it. And then that sort of almost that perhaps realization is probably the right word to use to describe it, that actually, oh, there are solutions out there. It's just because they become so bogged down in the day-to-day operations of their business that they haven't taken that step back and gone, oh, actually, if we took a step back, or I had somebody ask me a few questions about what we're trying to do, all of a sudden it starts that the sort of the juice is flowing about them coming up with the ideas with a little bit of, prompting or maybe some suggestions from my part. And I
Mhm.
think that's the bit where you then get into, you mentioned it a couple of times, sort of the lofty strategies sort of approach of going, well, actually, what that means is you're not just thinking about this one decision in isolation that sits over here in maybe, I don't know, the sales team. You're thinking about it from a holistic point of view of going, if we do this here, what's going to happen here, here, and
Mhm.
here, to enable you to get the what's next and the actual action and the results that sit behind the ideas that you're getting at a top level of the strategy. And I think those are
Right.
the things that really, yeah, light me up.
Well, yeah, you were just
Really.
building Lego there. I can see
Exactly. Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
putting pieces here. If I put this here, what
Yeah.
happens to that? And,
Yeah.
depending on how complex your Lego structure is or the
Yeah. Yeah.
business that you're addressing, you're starting to see how does something affect something else and how does that impact something else.
Yeah.
So what I heard is, you talked about exploring and expanding perspective getting beyond limiting perspective or limiting views, if you
Yeah.
will. You get bogged down inside your own sort of worldview of your business and your environment. I'm hearing a lot of possibility in that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what it's about. It's about, so almost, the concept that quite often I've seen, and particularly in my probably my corporate career, at certain parts of my corporate career, you'll be talking about a particular problem or challenge that you've got in the business, and you almost find a solution, and then the natural reaction is to stop at that solution. But actually, the first solution isn't necessarily the best solution, in the same way that the easiest solution isn't necessarily the right solution either. And so, therefore, I love it when you sort of almost brainstorming, for one of a better phrase, like, what are the possibilities of resolving this particular challenge, or finding a different answer to this problem, even though we think we might have found a solution. Because I think that's when you really start diving into curiosity in its truest form, I suppose, in my view, where you're really diving deep into, okay, so what is the root problem? Why is this an issue? What have we done about it before? Is that going to work again? If not, why not? What else could we do? What would happen if we did try that? Where's that going to take us? And all of a sudden, you're asking yourself, 10 or 11 different questions quite quickly, and coming up with numerous different answers. And I think when you've got, particularly I think with leadership groups in businesses, where you've got different people who think and uh, learn differently, and perhaps behave differently from the way they would approach problem solving, you then really, if you get that great mix of people as well at the same time, that to me is when you really get some really, really fantastic solutions that really work for businesses to take them forward and grow.
It's very interesting. Um, yeah, you said, the first solution isn't always the best one, or the easiest solution isn't always the best one. And what I heard was you're looking for different answers, you're looking for better solutions, you're looking for
Mm.
numerous answers, I think you said. So
Yeah,
more options. Um, and then you went into the problem solving and the great mix, the mix of people. The great mix of people is what brings into
mm,
uh, this ecosystem, if you will. It brings
yeah,
possibility in, right? You're tapping into that. Um, what I heard through all of that is that you have a natural, um, I feel that you're being pulled towards innovation.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And right?
Sorry, no, no, no. I'll let you carry on. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to link it to your childhood when innovation was at scale. We
Mm.
experienced, it was a new technology every time we turned around, and we're still experiencing that. We didn't see that earlier on. I'm a little older than you, so we didn't see as much when I was younger.
Yeah.
Um, but so this drive for innovation seems to be a theme for you. I'd like you to expand on that. How does that sit?
Yeah, no, yeah, I think that's a great observation you've made there. I think I'm always been looking at, so what can I do to make something more efficient? Like, what is it
Yeah.
that's going to make it more beneficial to, and to a certain degree, it's sort of what we are seeing now in the world of technology, where we've got tools and solutions and software now that enables us to do some of the um, uh, I suppose the unsexy side of business, in terms of that repetitive nature,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And for me, that's always been well, you're only ever going to develop curiosity and creativity and innovation at a larger scale in a business by freeing people's time up.
Mhm.
And that to me is the bit where I feel that I bring that, to your point, that innovation element, to going, okay, so how could you do this differently? What if we did it like this, and it freed up this amount of time for this person to go off and do this instead of that? What would that benefit the company? Would that free somebody else's time up to go and speak to more clients and improve customer service and experience? Or would it allow us to develop the team in a little bit more, a little bit more, and therefore provide better employee engagement, or is it about different systems and freeing people up to actually do some, you know, from their point of view, some more exciting work, I suppose, is the point.
Ooh, talk more about that. Exciting work.
Yeah. So I think for me, and again, it's sort of been born out of my own journey. I think this in terms of going and what prompted me to um, leave corporate life and start my own consultancy. Which, if I could just share that
Yeah,
bit
of
of my
course.
journey, and then sort of, and hence why I sort of
Hence
talk
the exciting
about what
work.
yeah, yeah, exciting work. Is that you know, I think what I realised was during COVID that I had a number of people who I knew who came to me. They had their own businesses. They were struggling to understand, like a lot of people were, you know, back 5 years ago, what was going to happen, how it was going to work, what support was out there, and just signposting people to help them, which then led to them
Mm.
coming back and saying, "Oh, we now need your business experience, Dave." And I thought, actually, what they're asking me to do is all of my, for want of a better phrase, favourite parts of the jobs that I was doing. And all of a sudden, it was the whole, you know, whether it be the Simon Sinek start with why, or having a purpose, or that sort of thing. And you know, I think people, and again, it probably leads into this, the technology piece that we're going through at the moment, is I think people need to feel that they're part of something, and that there's a
Mm.
belonging in what they're doing. And in order to
Mhm.
generate that, I think you've got to be my view would be, you've got to be doing work that's exciting, or is exciting to you. And that's
Mhm.
different things for different, you know, people. Some people love the um you know, the more what's the word I'm looking for? What picks up, you know, so the creativity of being an entrepreneur, and the ideas and the selling, and you know, some people love that. Other people hate
Mhm.
it. Some people
Mhm.
love the systems, processes, and you know, sort of services element of it, and you know, so for me, it's about going, okay, so what bits of jobs do people love doing, and how can we facilitate them to be able to do more of that, because they're more likely to be engaged, feel like they've got a purpose, and feel like they've got a belonging within the organization that they're working for, you know, small, medium, or large, it doesn't really
Mhm.
matter.
Mhm. Exactly. And so
Mm,
this is what I heard. You talked about efficiency first around doing things faster, so speed, ease, and time. To and what I heard was to free up people to
mm,
create the space to innovate so that they could do more exciting work. And,
yeah.
we were certainly influenced dramatically by the impact of innovation.
Mm,
I took typing in high school. That was a class, that was a thing.
yeah.
And,
Yeah.
we had to learn how to type. And then as we got older, typing was just something everybody did. And so you didn't necessarily learn the proper form for typing. But
Mm.
remarkably, I took typing, but my kids can type way faster than I can on these computers. They just go like mad.
Yeah.
And I think it's fascinating because they never took any typing lessons, and the keyboard is exactly the same. So I think it's fascinating
Yeah.
by that. And the point that I'm trying to make here is when when technology became so um, prevalent for all of us, in it, things became faster and things became easier naturally,
Yeah.
and yet we didn't necessarily pivot to benefit from technology in the same way. And people were still doing, for a very long time, and they still are in a lot of cases, still doing work that was labor intensive,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
technology
And I
could probably take care of, right?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting when you sort of, they first talk about the introduction of AI, and the whole purpose of, you know, the fact that ChatGPT is called ChatGPT because it's general purpose technology, in the
Mm-hmm.
sense that it's something that is going to impact and influence everybody in the world at some
Right.
point, in the same way that, you know, fire did, or the motor vehicle did, or the internet has. But I think it's, to your point, I think it's that bit around some of those technology advancements. Um, they didn't necessarily need to impact everybody. to the same level, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So to your point about so for example, the mobile phone, yes, we've all got mobile phones now, but to your point, it used to be, the old, big brick,
It wasn't very
telephone.
convenient.
Now, and when I speak to some of the students that I work with the careers things that I do in school, you start talking to them about, mobile phones going from those big bricks to the little, Nokia 80 whatever it was, 8210 or whatever it was, and now they're getting bigger, but the screens are getting bigger, and on all of those things. um yeah, I just look at that and I go, but not everybody's necessarily got a state of the art
Mm,
Samsung or Apple
right.
iPhone smartphone. People have still got, you know, other
Hmm.
versions, and it's yeah, and that to me is the bit where we've still got that, what how you've just described it, but I think it's just delivered in a slightly different way, in the type and the style of technology we're all using. But everything that's bought out, is all driven by, um, for me, is all driven by user experience, and therefore it's about efficiency and ease, and not need, for as an example, you know, you don't need to carry a phone, a camera, a notepad and pen around with you anymore, because you can do everything on your all of those
Hmm.
things on your smartphone.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. You're touching on something here. What I wrote down just now is more is not better.
yeah,
And at one time, I think that there was a stronger awareness around that. It seems to me now that
mm,
it's becoming really clear, ease, simplicity, speed. More is actually becoming a hindrance. More is actually now getting in the
100%.
way.
Yeah.
And where I'm going with that in terms of technology and supporting business leaders, particularly around, to your comment, strategies and results, this idea that if more is not better, and with chat GPT or AI, if you will,
Yeah.
generating content in abundance, where for a very long time, and certainly my generation grew
Mhm.
up, and I'm sure yours did as well, we grew up knowing that information was power,
Yeah.
knowledge was power. And content was the main driver of our expertise and our business
Mm.
credibility for a very long time. And so now I'm curious to your thoughts around AI specifically in support of helping your leaders make better decisions and getting them to practical results,
Yeah.
leaning into this
I think
idea
it's
of, mm,
yeah, sorry. I think it's interesting, the point you make, about, um sort of, yeah, information and knowledge was power, and I still, to a certain degree, agree that that's still the case, because actually, to get the best results out of any AI or modern technology, you've got to have the
mm,
understanding and knowledge about the best way to interact with that piece of software. And I think that's apparent, to your point, when you see, the some of the content that is shared on
mhm,
all sorts of different social media, platforms.
mhm,
And I think that's where um, that's where I think the leaders really need to hone in on the best way to use technology, because quite often I think people talk about AI and they get AI confused with automation,
ah,
and actually
mm.
they're two very distinctly different things.
Very nice nuance there. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, that
Share more.
actually most of the, I would say, oh, I wouldn't like to put a percentage, but I would say most of the challenges I discuss with business owners, the solution is actually automation, not necessarily AI. Now, AI forms part of that automation, but it's actually the automating of a manual process through software and through technology.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore I think you end up, and that to me is the bit where that knowledge piece fits quite nicely into that, is understanding the difference between all of the things that we currently have available to us and what the best solution is to those problems from a technology perspective.
Mm-hmm. As you're sharing this, I can only imagine your brain is full of lots of thoughts. What's coming up for you in this conversation right now? What is really standing out?
um, I think it's the fact that you sort of that we I'm going back to this bit about that you sort of articulated it really well about saying more isn't necessarily better. I think were the words that
Mm-hmm.
you used,
Mm-hmm.
and I keep coming back to this. We're really good as human beings at starting stuff,
Mm.
but we're really bad at stopping things. And actually, when it all boils down to it, actually, one of the questions I quite often ask people is, so if you're going to do that, what are you going to stop to enable you
Mm-hmm.
to do that? Because that's
Mm-hmm.
the bit that it all that sort of ultimate curiosity point of, well, yeah, we can do as much stuff as you want. There's all sorts of things we can add and add and add and add and add and add and add. But actually, that's just loading more things on people and the business and things like that. So actually, what are you going to stop doing to enable you to start doing that, if you think that is a higher priority
Yeah.
currently for the business? And I think that's what
Yeah.
it comes what we've spoken about. I think really lends itself to that. More isn't necessarily better.
Yeah, that's beautiful. To your point, the adding and adding and adding versus stopping.
Mm,
This is something I talk about all the time with clients around, certainly around their value proposition. You're really touching on this. It's the
yeah.
concept of we're wanting to really serve our audience. And
Mm,
so we tend to listen to what their needs are and think, I can do that. Sure, we can do that. Sure, I can add that on. Sure, I can make that experience better. And so we add and add and add. And at
mm,
some point, I have a model called the business value ladder that speaks to this. And at some point, we get what I call diminishing returns, right? And it
yeah.
ends up being that you're actually just eating into your own profitability because the returns in terms of your client experience are not
Mm,
elevated at the same level as your revenue.
yeah.
You just start
Yeah.
eating at profits and you're thinking, why am I not profitable anymore? It's because you've been adding and adding and adding and not
Yeah.
necessarily, to your point, stopping to generate the clarity that is going to
Mm,
allow you to understand what is the real value that we're delivering here? What is the innovation
yeah.
that needs to happen? What is
Mm,
actually inhibiting or getting in the way? Where do you must see this, I imagine, with your own clients when they're wrestling with being very
mm,
attached to things they've been doing for a very long time or listening to their clients and thinking, but they're asking for that. And maybe
mm.
that's not aligned. Where do you bump up against this with your work?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's definitely an element of. I think I see it mainly when people don't ask the right stakeholders the right question. So
Mm,
to your point, actually, that people talk about the customer experience or their employee engagement or the operational delivery of their products and things like that, but they don't necessarily go, okay, so to your point, well, what does the client want?
mm,
What is what are their pinch points in our from the feedback they give us? What are their pinch points? And I'd go back to my time in hospitality, and it would normally be things like takes ages to get a second drink in a restaurant. I have to sit and wait for somebody to bring the bill over. It then takes me ages to pay. So you sort of go, okay, so if we focused on those three things to make those three things as smooth as possible for the client, yes, you've still got to deliver exceptional food quality and exceptional
mhm.
drinks quality, but they just should become business as usual standards that you're operating to. It's those pinch points. So you don't need
Yeah.
to worry about how fancy the glasses are, or the plates. It's those sorts of things, because people remember how well you dealt with the pinch points that they've seen. And I think that's the thing I see, is that we don't
Hmm.
necessarily ask, as I said earlier, ask the right questions of the right people, and those
Yeah.
better questions lend themselves to more clarity in the answer, which then lends itself to better clarity around what you need to do next.
Right. That's very, very interesting. So,
Mm.
you know, as you said, the pinch points are the things that the clients remember, and these are the things that are going to get in the way of your being successful if you're not
Mm.
addressing them. Um,
Yeah,
so that's what I like to call table stakes.
yeah.
In other words, you've got to address the things that people want or are expecting from the service.
Mm.
And to your point, they're not going to necessarily care whether the glasses are fancy or not. They will care if they're clean and
Yeah,
whether they arrive on
yeah.
time. They're going to arrive. So if you can get, I love the clarity here, because if you can get the table stakes um, simplified and be crystal clear on delivering those
Mm.
exceptionally well, now you're in the game,
Yeah,
right? Now you're actually in the game, and you're not, um, but your business model is not complicated with complexity. It's not so difficult to deliver because it's not about the glasses and it's not about all the other
mm.
things. It's about these very basic table stakes that you have
Mm.
mastered to put you in the game. And now you can start thinking, okay, so from this point, what is our differentiation?
Yeah,
Right? What is the thing that now is going to create the unique experience that only we can deliver, because we've got the
yeah.
table stakes figured out? A lot of companies struggle with this because they come up against trying to do too many things. There's too many table stakes in their model, if you will.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
seeing nodding. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah, no, I would agree entirely, and I think it's something that I don't know, another great example that immediately sprung to mind as you were talking about sort of differentiation is um, the car industry, as as an example. I was lucky enough to work in the UK car industry probably about 20 years ago now, and you've got your sort of uh, standard, sort of, and apologies, I'll probably have to use some UK car brands, which I'm not sure are necessarily in parts of the world where your audience is, but the sort of the brands like well, I suppose Ford's an American company now, but
Mm-hmm.
Vauxhall, those things, they've got a small car, they've got an SUV, and they've got everything in between,
Mm-hmm.
and you sort of go, I get that, because you're a large motor company, you want to cover all bases, but then you go to a premium brand like
Mm-hmm.
Ferrari or Lamborghini
Mm-hmm.
or those sorts
Mm-hmm.
of people, and they just go, we're just going to sell maybe two or three different models of cars,
Yeah.
and they're going to be premium, they're going to be expensive, but we know what we are
Mm-hmm.
selling, and who we know
Mm-hmm.
what we're selling and who we're selling them to,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not
Mm-hmm.
going to go, oh, I think Ferrari should have you know a small car as a first car for a newly qualified they
Mm-hmm.
just don't do that. Yes, Lamborghini might have played in the SUV market, but it's still a premium
Mm-hmm.
SUV. They're not playing against
Yeah.
the core motor manufacturers in the world. And I think that's, to your point, is that's where that differentiation really works, where you
Yeah.
go, actually, we know that we are playing in a marketplace that is, whether it be driven by affluent demographic, whatever it might be, geography, whatever it might be, is that's the bit for me where you go, right, that brand's got it. They
Yeah.
understand what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting. A lot of people think differentiation needs to be something that is either product based and
Mm,
premium. Right, those are the two. In highly
yeah,
commoditized industries, particularly services, it's like, oh, there's no way to
yeah,
differentiate services. I mean, some of the bigger companies, sure, this is the kind of here the resistance that I get. But what we're really talking about here, whether it's Lamborghini, Ferrari, or any brand. What we're talking about is that they are serving a very niche market. They know
Yeah.
exactly what their point of mastery is. They've defined their point of mastery and they're serving a very niche market. That can happen at any price point. It
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily have to happen at a high price point, but what it allows
Mm,
for is mastery. And the pricing
mm,
of the mastery or the packaging of that mastery is completely unique. And it doesn't necessarily need to
yeah.
be a very high end piece. It is expressing that we want to
Mm,
serve this particular client. And what I see a lot, and I'm curious about this for you, I see a ton of resistance around this because what if we stop doing this stuff? What
mm,
if these we lose clients because we stop doing this stuff and we move into more niche mastery, if you will, or a very niche target
mm,
or serving a particular type of client or buyer? I experience a great deal of generally resistance around, but this has
mm.
always worked. Why would we stop
Yeah.
doing this now, right? Where do you
Yeah.
see that in your work?
Yeah. So yeah, again, it's quite an interesting sort of challenge that I think a lot of businesses who I speak to, um, they see that, because it is at the end of the day, you know, to your point, you're almost going, yes, I want you to switch that revenue stream off. And as soon as you start talking about that, people go, what you know,
Yes.
what are you talking
Why would I
about?
do that?
Well, yeah, what, yeah, could you explain that to me? But what you quite often find is that it will be, you know, it will be the revenue streams that, let's say they've got a massive product portfolio or service portfolio, and actually it's what you actually asking to do is go, I suppose it's a little bit like the Pareto principle, that 80% of your sales are going to come from 20% of your clients, or 20% of your
Yeah.
products, or 20% of your service, like whatever it might be. So actually, yes, you might lose some sales, but proportionately, when you look at the amount of work that it takes to produce those widgets or to deliver those services, actually, if you took those in isolation and just looked at the
Hmm.
commercial impact that was having on the business, you'd go, well, actually, it might be losing money. It might
Hmm.
be incredibly low margins versus some of the other products. So
Yeah.
therefore, why would you not want to reinvest
Hmm.
the labour or the resources into what your core product line is, that
Yeah.
and develop that where you've got expertise
Right.
and things like that. And I see that probably mostly in probably the manufacturing clients that I speak to,
Mm.
because that is a quite often it will be, relatively small businesses who are manufacturing something of some description, but there will always be that slight tweak that somebody's thought of, and before you
Yeah.
know it, I think you mentioned this, you've quadrupled your, you know, stock range
Yeah. Yeah.
and moved your revenue by 10%.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and therefore you wonder why that your profitability is not as good as it was. And again, goes back a little bit to my point about, well, if you're going to do that, what's the impact on, you know your stock management system? What's the impact on your team? What's the impact on
Yeah.
order? What's the impact on cash flow? All of these things, and all of a sudden you go, actually, it's not really going to, give you that much more profit, you know, for the level of resource that
Complexity.
you're,
Yeah.
the in complexity, that's probably a better word, the complexity that you're bringing into the business.
Yeah, because every time you're adding something or, accommodating a request,
Mm,
it's putting a shift, it's adjusting your system somewhat. It's
yeah.
taking people off their point of strength and
Mm,
saying, "Oh, I've got to pivot here just this once to do this thing." And maybe there's some profit in that, but you start adding to it. It's kind of like death by a
mm.
thousand cuts we hear. It's
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's what happens in businesses think, oh, you know what? Yes, I've got however many clients they're holding on to or whatever. I see this quite often. Oh, yeah, but those clients don't take any time. they don't cost much. They don't ask for
mm,
much. They don't, it's okay. I don't have to serve them that often. And yet there's hundreds of them. So you multiply, one
that,
times a
yeah,
few hundred, and then you're thinking of all the touch points and all the things, and those add up subtly in the system. And
yeah,
really take time away from the ability to your point, innovate for impact,
yeah.
right?
And but I think the one thing I would say is that I can I can understand where businesses are coming from with it
Mm-hmm.
to a certain degree, because I think it's, certainly the geo-economic
Yeah.
situation currently is, means that I think people are um worried about
Oh, yeah.
business future and the people that are working for them, and that again, that's another conversation I have quite regularly with people. So
Mm-hmm.
therefore you sort of go, well, to your point, I can sort of see why you've pivoted in that direction, because it's
Yeah.
sort of helping to protect a business. But
Mm-hmm.
again, and again, this is very difficult because we all make a number of decisions based on short-term reasoning, is actually going, well, actually, I'm not going to do that because in the long term, it's going to mean we're going to be able to do this. And I think that's a lot of the
Yeah.
time where I see the resistance is that, um, because of and again, it goes back to a lot of the stuff we've already spoken about, because of the short term, or sorry, the speed at which things change in all ways, shapes, and sizes. I think whereas before you'd have businesses doing you know, a 5 year financial
Oh my
and
gosh. Yeah.
plan for a business, you sort of go, I don't think we know what's going to be happening this time next week, let alone what's going to be happening in 5 years' time. So you almost, again, going back to some of the stuff I do with my clients, it really does become a lofty strategy that we end up talking about, because the actual nuts and bolts of the actions that the business is taking, are changing almost on a monthly basis because of something that's happened, or this has happened, or this product line's collapsed
Yeah.
because we can't get the materials from this country because of this situation that's happening now, or all of those sorts of things, that now we've got the global impact that we see on business now
It's
is
phenomenal. It's phenomenal. Mm-hmm.
it is phenomenal. And even from little things like, obviously it's not a little thing, but the some of the wars that have been going on, in recent
Mm-hmm.
years, all of a sudden the impact that has on supply chains, or you've got, tariffs being introduced into certain countries by certain countries, and it just changes that dynamic, that all of a sudden the businesses are going, oh, actually, we've to your point, we sort of pivoted into this, and then all of a sudden we actually can't get
What we need.
the X
Yeah.
and Y to deliver Z
Yeah.
over here to our clients.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So interesting. I'm thinking back to um, when I was a girl, younger, there was what we might call more space in the system,
Mm,
meaning, you know, um, there was more time to do the work. There were more
yeah.
workers to do the work. And that allowed for people and our humanity, our humanness, to be
Mm,
human.
yeah.
Whereas as particularly technology and also globalization and as everything's been piled on to the people who are doing the work and building the
Mm,
businesses, all of the speed and complexity that's now upon us has impacted our ability to sort of just have the space to do the work properly,
yeah.
right? There's
Yeah.
no space in the system anymore. And the system could be our workday, it could be our workflow, it could be our business, or it could be even
Mm,
our network of, clients and suppliers. There's just no space, meaning time or bandwidth or
yeah.
capacity, extra capacity. Everyone is really pushed hard. And I think when we're
Mm,
talking about that now, that now more than ever, the importance of stopping things to allow for our humanness in our work
yeah.
environment and our life. the importance of stopping things is becoming increasingly critical, if you will,
Yeah,
in order
yeah.
for us as humans to function.
Mm. And I'd agree with that entirely. And I think it goes back to the, I don't think it's any coincidence that there's a rise in mental health and
Mm,
well-being challenges across the globe.
yeah.
Certainly in the in the larger economies, or certainly some of the larger Western economies, it tends to be
Hmm.
reported more probably. Um, and off the back of that, that comes from, to your point about the workforce. The workforce has also increased in a very
Yeah.
um, different way because we have got a you know a much broader mix of males and females in the workforce. So there's
Mm,
the impact. So therefore, there's the impact on the family.
hmm.
Dynamic. And I think about my own childhood, and my mom was working before you know I was born. I'm the eldest of two children. Um, and she stopped working until my
Mm,
younger brother was old enough to go to our
mm,
secondary school, so 11 or 12.
hmm.
So probably for 14 years, she
Yeah.
wasn't
You was at
in
home.
she was at home. And in again, that is not necessarily something that is easily achievable by the majority of family units
Yeah.
across the globe now.
Yeah.
So therefore, that impact of the impact and it's nobody's fault in this regard, but then the knock-on
It's
impact
just,
that's having on everybody
yeah.
is
The trickle
I
down
don't
effect.
think is talked I don't think is
Mm,
talked about enough to a
hmm.
certain degree,
Hmm.
that we've got this situation where and I don't know whether it's same for you guys over over the pond in Canada, but certainly in the UK it's very difficult for certainly young people to get into the housing market
Hmm. Yeah.
without them being in a couple and both having some reasonably well paid jobs to be able to afford to
Yeah.
save and all of a sudden that knock on pressure
Yeah.
from a personal point of view, that's
Absolutely.
then impacted, to your point about we're adding and adding and adding into people's
Yeah.
working lives as well.
Hmm.
It's unsustainable um,
Well, I think,
some
yeah,
way, I suppose.
I think you were touching on some really interesting topics here. That the concept is the pressure in the system, right? So
Yeah,
the pressure on the individual in their work and or home life, and how that
yeah,
impacts the rest of the system, because the
yeah.
pressure on the individual impacts the pressure on the family, and the business is impacting the pressure.
Mm,
So the pressure in the system is what I think that we get to reflect on. And as
mm,
we look at the systems in which we live and work, you know, I think the biggest thing I would um, highlight here is where are you adding and adding and adding in an effort to do and be more? And where might the question be, where is that actually having the effect that you want? And where
mm,
might you stop or pivot or do
yeah,
something differently that would give you more or relieve some of the pressure in the system and give you
mm,
the space to
yeah.
innovate, the space to
It's
create, whether it's
mm,
for your business or for your life, to design around that. And there are, if we can look to to the exploration of our
yeah.
environment, whether it's our business or our life, the idea is that if we explore in there and kind of just go asking some really good questions about,
Yeah.
is all of this genuinely necessary? All these lofty strategies that we're pursuing,
Mm,
are they
yeah.
really
And
important?
it is, and I think quite often that I'm not a particular big fan of the phrase work-life balance, because I don't think you can
Mm,
strike a balance. It's more about integrate. For me, it's sort
yeah,
of
same.
integrations, almost a
It's
better
just one
word.
life.
It's just, yeah, exactly, yeah.
There isn't
You've
a
just
work
got
life.
life.
It's just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
life.
You've just got life. But I think
Yeah.
because of that, we don't, or we lose sight of the fact that we can make decisions that have certain consequences, but we can be comfortable with those consequences. So
Mhm.
actually, if we need to spend, I don't know, more time looking after our own health, then
Mhm.
in order to do that, we have got to start exercising. So therefore, the time that we're spending doing that, where is that time coming
Yeah.
from in our I always remember when I was at the beginning of my career in hospitality, so probably about 20, yeah, probably about 17 years ago now. And we used to send our senior operations um, people to Disney to do Disney's customer service
Mm.
programs. And alongside that, they also spent a lot of time utilizing Stephen Covey's Seven Habits.
Okay.
And I remember doing the internal sort of Covey course that we did, and watching the video, which I still share today, and I still utilize in my own life, of the big rocks principle.
Yep.
And and going, well, actually, what are the big rocks that I need to accomplish
Mhm.
this week to make sure I feel at the end of the week I've, like, I've integrated
Mhm. Mhm.
everything as
Mhm.
best I can. And I think sometimes we try, as the video shows, for anybody who's not watched it, you can put all of the little things into a bowl, and then try and fit the big things in, and that just doesn't work. And I think
Mhm.
that's the bit that we're sort of
Yeah.
talking about. It's about, like, how do you remove those little things and go, well, actually, I'm not going to be able to go and do this with my friends because I'm
Right.
doing this with the kids, or
Right.
whatever it might be.
I love it. That's big rocks principle. We talk about big rocks a lot here in our home. So it's a very, very familiar phrase for us. The other one that I think that, sort of piggybacks onto this is the concept. And I'm sorry, I won't necessarily accurately attribute this, but I believe that it may have been Brene Brown, but she talks about juggling the balls, juggling all
Yeah,
the balls. And some balls are rubber and some balls are glass.
yeah,
Know which ones are glass, because if you
yeah,
drop them, bad things happen.
yeah.
So helping, as you're thinking about the big rocks and you're thinking about what you're juggling, um,
Mm,
knowing what the big rocks are and knowing what the glass balls are, if you will
yeah,
help strategically identify
mm,
what you need to hold on to
yeah, yeah.
and
And I think that's,
emphasize. Mm,
yeah, and I think that's such a great concept, because I like, similar to the big rocks thing, it's equally applicable in life and business as well. And what are the things that you can't afford, not to be able to do in your business,
yeah,
and likewise, what don't you want to fall by the wayside in your home
exactly.
life as well.
Exactly. Well, as we're building our Lego and we think about which blocks are going to have what impact on what I'm trying to build, it's all
Yeah,
coming right back. As you're reflecting on this conversation, Dave, I just want to give you an opportunity to perhaps consider what we've been chatting about for the last hour or so, and what really would you like to highlight from today that you would like to our listeners to anchor on, if there were one
yeah.
thing?
I think for me, it's the concept of asking yourself better questions,
Mm,
and really challenging yourself to, like, what is it that you want to be achieving. And and again, that's equally applicable across it. But it's something that I have been, a big believer in, is that by asking yourself and others to a certain degree better questions, you're able to create the exceptional experiences that you want to have, that you want your family to have, that you want your people to have at work, you want your customers to have. That's the bit for me that I'd want people to think about.
better questions for yourself, of others, and you even touched on it earlier, better questions for AI as well. Skillful
Yeah,
prompts, right?
yeah,
Just
yeah,
asking
yeah,
better questions. I want to
yeah,
highlight that too.
yeah,
And here we go, coming right back to the Business Explorer, asking better questions. So beautiful. Thank you for that. So, Dave, for those people who would like to connect with you and perhaps access more of your wisdom and perhaps your skills, where might they find you?
Yeah, so I do most of my work on LinkedIn. So I am Dave Rogers, the Business Explorer on LinkedIn. They can also find me on Substack. So I write on Substack as well. Again, the Business Explorer. Or just reach out through my Linktree account as well. There's a lot of free resources. Again, I'm the Business Explorer on Linktree, whether it be access to my books or my TEDx talk or some of the free resources that I share for people through the business as well.
Amazing. Lots of places to connect with you and access
Yeah.
all of and some of and more of what you might share with other people. Thank you for your generosity and your wisdom today, Dave. It's been such a delight having you today.
Now, thank you for the opportunity to join, Michelle. I really enjoyed today's conversation. I hope the listeners and the viewers do too when they watch it back.
Oh, lots of gems in this one. So have every confidence in that. Thank you so much. And we'll see you again soon for another one, perhaps. Bye for
Yeah.
now.